Okay, welcome back everybody. This is video number 5. And in this video, the main things we'll focus on are 3 things. Let me post it here on the whiteboard. Okay, just 1 second. Okay, the first is what we call rejoinders. Now, in the previous video, we talked about using WH questions and frequency adverbs and time expressions. Okay, so for example, if we're starting a basic conversation or a dialogue with another person, we typically might ask questions like using the WH questions. However, in order to make the conversation continue, we use rejoinders to help the conversation along. Okay, now I'll explain more about the rejoinders here in a moment. Let me just post here the main things. Okay, and then next is follow-up questions. So we want to ask more questions, and then typically using WH questions to find out as much as we can to get more information about the other person. Okay, so it's important that we can ask various WH questions. And it's important that we can ask questions that relate to what the person said to you so that we can ask more questions and get more information from that person, okay? All right, and that will all be explained in this video. And then finally, assignment number 3, okay? It is going to be a writing assignment, and I'll explain that towards the end of the video, how to do it and how to prepare it for the assignment number 3. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and start first discussing about the rejoinders for conversation or for dialogues. Okay. So we know now that we want to use WH questions so we can find out more information about a person. And we use frequency adverbs in order to find out the frequency or how often somebody does certain things like their daily activities. Example, as we mentioned, wake up in the morning, get dressed, eat breakfast, go to school, brush your teeth, all these kind of typical activities. And then we want to find out the frequency. Then we ask questions like how often do you or do you ever? Okay, so that is what we had done before. Now, the next step is to get you guys speaking in full sentences, complete sentences, as well as be able to describe or explain in more detail. And lots of times we'll do this in a conversation, okay? So a conversation is good if we are able to ask certain questions and then respond to those questions and then keep going with those questions so that we find out more information, okay? And then also expresses interest and makes the conversation more enjoyable for both people. All right, so let's take a look here first at rejoinders. Okay, now, just some basics here. When one person speaks, another person responds, and this is what a rejoinder is, okay? So if I'm A, and I said, maybe I ask a question, okay? How are you today? And then B is the person that responds and say, oh, I'm doing very good. Now, B said, I'm doing very good. Now, as a rejoinder, I'm going to respond to them and say something like, oh, glad to hear it, or that's great to hear, okay? I'm glad to hear that. Me too. So this would be an example of a rejoinder. And then here you see an example. Hey, how are you today? I feel terrible. So now A responds to what B said. B said, I feel terrible. And A said, I'm sorry to hear that. Now, in this case, we're talking about something bad that happened. So when we respond, we show or express that we feel bad for them because they said they feel terrible. Okay. So the rejoinder here is, I'm sorry to hear that. Now, rejoinders are usually either one word or a short phrase. Okay, so we don't have to say too much, but just enough to show expressing our feeling in response to what the person had said. Now, for example, it says it responds to the news like good news, bad news, surprising news, or just regular news, typical news. Okay, so these are the four types of situations where we want to respond with a rejoinder. Okay, and that's going to be either a one word or a short phrase. So let's take a look at different types of news, examples of them, so you can see and then understand what kind of rejoinder to use. All right, so the first example is good news. And usually good news means that we're going to be happy and feeling good, and then the person who's listening, hopefully they'll feel good too, okay? So example of good news, maybe somebody says, A says, I'm going on a trip to Europe in the summer. B responds, really, that's great, okay? Another piece of good news, I just bought a new car. You know, maybe it's a brand new car. Oh, terrific, wonderful, you know, that's great. All these could be good as rejoinders. I met a wonderful girl, or I met a wonderful guy yesterday. Well, wonderful, that's great to hear. I'm glad for you. These are very short phrases, uh, but they show that I understand what the person had said as being good news, and then I can express my feeling using the rejoinder, okay? So I'm happy for them, or I feel good for them, or that they're lucky, then we can use these kind of rejoinders. Okay, so this is all good news. All right, next, the opposite. What if we have bad news? I don't feel well today. Oh, that's too bad. My friend lost his wallet last night. Oh, that's terrible. My teacher got angry with me today. I'm sorry to hear that. Now, so we're hearing bad news, and we want to respond in a similar manner. So it's not sounding like very good news, so we want to show and express that it's not good news, okay? We wouldn't want to say, oh, if the person, I don't feel well today. Oh, well, that's good. That'd be a little bit strange, right? So we want to say that's too bad. All right, so there's bad news. Okay, next we have surprising news. Guess what? I'm pregnant. You're kidding. So notice that not only this kind of question and surprising news, but when we do the rejoinder, we show with an exclamation point at the end. Okay, so we're trying to say this quite strongly. Okay, so we use the exclamation point, and you'll see that for each example. Because when you get surprising or sudden news, we usually respond or react with more dramatically. Okay, let's look at the second example. I just won $1 million in the lottery. Get out of here, meaning you're crazy. That's unbelievable. You know. Then we use this kind of rejoinder. Last example, I will play baseball in the next Olympics. So this is something that isn't normal. Most people wouldn't be in the Olympics, and especially somebody that you know personally. So it's very surprising and amazing if somebody actually says this. Okay, here's a good response. I can't believe it. Or no way, impossible. You know, these would be kind of rejoinders that we'd use in surprising situations. Right? And so typically you would put an exclamation point at the end, and then you say it more dramatically. You wouldn't just say, you're kidding. Get out of here. I can't believe it. No, you'd say it more dramatically and with a show of surprise. You're kidding. Get out of here. I can't believe it. Okay, so this is how we want to respond to surprising news. Okay, now we got one more. Oops, let me get back to my mouse and I'll clear off all that. Okay, so we've got regular news. That means just typical things that happen, okay? So one person says, I'm going to watch TV tonight. I see. Okay, so this is a simple rejoinder, just showing that you acknowledge or understand what they're saying. I'm going to have kimbap for lunch. Oh yeah? Or oh really? Okay. I have a dinner plan with my friends Friday. That's nice. Good to hear. Okay, so something like this would be a good rejoinder. So these are like typical situations that you know, especially for a student, university student, might be very common. And so we're not going to be that surprised, or we're not going to have a dramatic response in most cases, right? So we just have a typical response that's normal, but comfortable and relaxing to respond with, okay? But each time, depending on the news, we want to respond with a rejoinder that matches well with what the news is, okay? So we had 4 different kinds. All right, now take a look here. When we start off a conversation, somebody usually starts off with a question or a greeting. Okay, they may greet first and then have a question, and then the other person is going to respond. Okay, and so typically, as we mentioned in previous classes, that we might use WH questions to get more information. Okay, but then we also want to continue and find out more, as much information as possible. Okay, and this is usually where students, when they practice in English, struggle, because they're not used to asking a lot of questions in English. They're used to being asked a lot of questions, and then they answer, they respond to the question, okay? But actually having to make questions typically seems more difficult for students. So we need to practice WH questions more, and also listen carefully and focus on what the person has said, so that we know what is an appropriate WH question to ask next, and what kind of questions to ask to get more or better information. So it's like I had mentioned before, if you're like an investigator or a reporter in the news, maybe you're an interviewer, and you want to find out good information, then you need to ask good questions, and you need to ask the right kind of questions. And so that's where the WH questions are very important. Okay, so if you know the function of the WH question, then you'll know how to use them in a dialogue, and then be able to ask those questions comfortably and naturally. Okay, all right, so we'll take a look at some examples and get some ideas, and then I want to write out an example of our own on the whiteboard later. Okay, so example, one person says, I went out for dinner last night. Now this is probably regular or typical news, so the rejoinder, B responds with, I see, yeah, because this is just very normal. Okay, but now if we want this dialogue to continue, we need to ask more questions, or state something to keep the listener interested, in order for the conversation to continue. Otherwise, the conversation will stop, and the two people will have nothing to talk about. Okay, so it's very important to have conversation skills. So that means it's important that you can be a good listener, but also you can ask good questions. Okay, so both of those are important in dialogue and conversation. And in practicing your English, you need to listen very carefully to what WH questions they're using. Okay, and then you want to be able to respond to them with your own WH questions, or at least use a rejoinder. Okay, like they did here when they said, I see. All right, so let's take a look at another example. Okay, so one person says, I saw a movie last night. And again, now, maybe depending on the person, it could be normal or a little bit special. Maybe it was during a holiday or on the weekend, not on a weekday. So we don't know about that yet. But this person said, I saw a movie last night. Okay, now, so their partner, the other person, responds with, oh, really? Okay, now, maybe they're going to use the WH question, what, to continue the dialogue. Okay, so based on what the first person said, because they said, I saw a movie last night. Okay, so important what the activity is. So we know what the activity is, and that was that they watched a movie. Okay, so when we do our follow-up question, what movie did you see? Okay, because we do not know that information yet. All we know is that they saw a movie, but we don't know any more details. Okay, so now this is our opportunity to get more details and find out more. And that's why we use the follow-up questions, so that we can get those kind of details. Okay, so they said, what movie did you see? second, my cursor has disappeared. Okay, there we go. Okay, so, and then probably A would respond with something like, I saw Train to Busan 2. Okay, and that was their answer, right? Okay, so now it's my turn to ask another question. Okay, so in this case, we decided to use the WH question where. So where did you go? Possibly you might say, oh, I went to Lotte Cinema, or I met my friend in downtown and we went to CGV. Okay, so this can tell us where. Okay, now they have a follow-up question, who? Okay, so who was in the movie? And maybe they'll say, Kang Dong-won was in the movie. I think that's his name, Kang Dong-won. I think he was the actor in Train to Busan 2. Okay, so right, they want to know the name of somebody in the movie, probably a famous or well-known actor or actress in the movie. Now, so this is a good way to start. And this dialogue can continue, but it's a good start because the first person starts out with a statement, I saw a movie last night. And when A responds with, oh, really? Okay, and this is actually a rejoinder. It's a question, but it's actually a rejoinder because they're expressing a little bit of interest and they responded to their statement. Okay, then we asked some follow-up questions based on what their answers were, we could ask other follow-up questions using WH based on what they answered with. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're asking questions related to the subject matter that they are explaining about. Okay, now this is something we will do in class later on, a little bit of practice dialogue. Okay, but what I would like to do at this time, okay, hold on a second. I'm going to stop the share for a minute. Okay, so I can go back to the whiteboard. Okay, let's clear that off. And let's try as if we were doing a dialogue together as A and B. Okay. Okay, so A might start off with a question. Now this is a good one to start off with because, for example, if the day is Monday, which is the day after the weekend just finishing, okay, so the weekend just finished, and you see your friend, your classmate, your teacher, your professor, your family members, and you ask, oh, how was your weekend? Because in Western society, when we want to greet each other, we often start off with a question like, how was your weekend? Or how was your day? Okay, how are you doing today, right? As a typical question, but it's also a greeting. So this is a great way to start. All right, so they asked the question, how was your weekend? Okay, and then B might respond with, well, it depends on what kind of news we want to give. Let's say, let's go with surprising news. Okay, and they said, oh, I met an old friend from kindergarten. Now, kindergarten is the grade level you would be in before you start first grade. Okay, so way back before you started elementary school, all right? So if you met somebody from that long ago, compared to what you are now as a university student, that's a long time, over 10 years. So this could be something interesting to talk about. But how should A respond? Now, they should use a rejoinder first because B made a statement, a surprising news statement. Oh, I met an old friend from kindergarten. So when A responds to the rejoinder, we need to respond with something appropriate for this surprising situation. So something like maybe, oh, really? That sounds great. Okay, something like this. So we have, oh, really, as a rejoinder. And then they even responded more with that sounds great, a short phrase. Okay, so both of these could actually be rejoinders in this particular part of the dialogue right here. So, oh, really? And that sounds great. Both could be rejoinders. Okay, now we want this dialogue to continue. Now, what B might do is a response to that or ask their own question. Okay, so it really depends on the situation, right? But let's just say that B says, how about you? How was your weekend? Okay, and then now it's A's job to answer. And they're saying, it was so-so. I just stayed home all weekend. I was a homebody. Okay, now, first of all, they said it was so-so. So they just had like a normal weekend, not very exciting, maybe not terrible though either. Okay, so normal news. And they said that they stayed home all weekend. And they mentioned that I was a homebody. Now, a homebody is somebody who does not go outside and they stay home. So in this case, for the weekend, they were a homebody. Now, I usually hear Korean students say Bangkok. Bangkok as meaning, similar meaning as being a homebody. Okay, so their news is not so great. Not terrible, but not great either. Okay, so now B's turn to add a rejoinder. And then B might say, sorry to hear that. Okay, now they may even ask a question. Why didn't you go out? Okay, so now we have our WH question, why. So far we used how, and there's how again, there. And then we have why. Okay, so these are WH questions that we've used so far. Okay, and then A, okay, now should respond to their question, why didn't you go out? Okay, so their response, I didn't feel well and I had lots of homework. Okay, and so B's chance to add another rejoinder, okay, because they want to express a feeling based on this news, because in this case, the news is a little bit more bad news, a little bit more depressing news. And now we'll try a different rejoinder because earlier they said, sorry to hear that. And they might say something like, oh, well, I hope you feel better now. Okay. And then A. Yes. I'm feeling much better today. Okay. Okay, so they responded with yes, I'm feeling much better today. Now, and then they ask a question again, in this case using how. How about getting some coffee? And let's finish it here with B responding with sounds great. Let's go to Edia. Okay, and then maybe the dialogue will finish here and they'll head off to the coffee shop. Okay, but we have a typical conversation and start off by discussing about the weekend. and finding out some news, whether good news or bad news, and then expressing interest or concern based on the kind of news they have. So that's what the rejoinders are for, is to express our feeling of if we agree or disagree, or if we feel good or bad about what they said. We'd use rejoinders for that. And then the WH questions are important in order to keep the dialogue going, okay? Until we've had enough to say, and then the conversation will end. But your goal is to be able to make these kind of dialogues and to express yourself, all right? Now, the other thing that you'd want to be able to do, besides, okay, like for example, make this kind of dialogue using rejoinders and WH questions, because we use some follow-up questions here, okay? But let's try another example. I'm going to clear off the board. Okay, now the other thing that's very important in practicing your English and with dialogue is that when you answer, instead of just saying one thing, you try to give a little more information, okay? So I might say like this. Okay, A might start off with, okay, we'll start with another question. Okay, what did you do yesterday, they asked. And yesterday happened to be Sunday in this example, okay? So what did you do yesterday? Okay, and then B might respond with something like, I went to a park in the afternoon. Now, they could finish here and just say, I went to a park in the afternoon. But what I'd like you to get used to doing is when some of you ask a question, particularly me, when I ask you a question or your classmates ask you a question, is to try to give a little more information within your explanation. So if you said, I went to a park in the afternoon, I had a great time with my friend from high school. Okay, so something like that. So again, I could have just ended it here. I could have just said I went to the park in the afternoon. Okay, but I decided to give a little more information, which for the listener, A, makes this a little bit more interesting, and it gives them more information to ask a question about. So this is something that I would like you guys to work on during this semester. Now, we're in Unit 1 right now, and then we'll be going to Unit 6 next, and then we'll be working on some other units. But always, whenever you have a chance to answer, try to answer with more than just one sentence. Try to explain a little bit more information, okay? All right, so based on what they said, okay, the person A might have a follow-up question for that. Well, actually, let's use a rejoinder first because we were practicing that. Sounds nice. Okay, so something like this. Sounds nice. How often do you meet your friend from high school? And then B might respond like this. We go to the same university, so we meet at least once a week. Okay, so this is a good question because this WH question, how often do you, is what we practiced before. And in this case, we want to know the frequency. Okay, and then they respond, we go to the same university, so we meet at least once a week. So there we use the time expression once a week. Okay. All right, now that's pretty good. So I'm going to end it. I'm going to end this dialogue here, though. Obviously, the dialogue could continue. There's much more we could find out about the student's friend, what kind of things they do, then they could turn around and ask person A what they do or what they did yesterday, and then the dialogue would continue. Okay, but the biggest thing is I want you to get used to describing and explaining more. Try to give more details and information when you answer, and try not to limit yourself to just one sentence or a very short answer. Okay, try to get yourself to say more as much as you can. Okay, so that's good. All right, now the next thing I want to do is explain about the assignment that will be due. All right, let me clear off the board again. And I mentioned earlier that your assignment will be a writing assignment. Okay, in your writing assignment, your goal is to okay, like so. So it says write 10 sentences about your daily life, daily activities. Okay, now, and that's going to be up to you as to what kind of activities you want to mention and the ones that you would typically do during a week. Okay, now when you write, okay, so you need to use either the frequency adverbs or time expressions in your sentences. So it's almost like you're just describing your schedule for each week and what you would typically do during the week. Okay. Okay, and then you're going to write your name, your student name, and your class number at the top of your paper. Okay, so it's very important so that I make sure that you're in your proper class and I know who you are. Okay, so make sure you have that. And then, of course, it's important that when you write, I guess I better put this in here too. Okay, make sure you write neat and clean so I can read it. Well, the other thing I want to say, okay, so make sure you write neat and clean. Yeah, that's good. Make sure each sentence has a period at the end. Okay, and that's what a period is right there. So if I circle it, this is called a period. And I'll write that here, period. So for punctuation, we must put a period at the end of each sentence to indicate that that sentence is finished, okay? So you'll see I have a period for each sentence, right? If I don't place the period there, then the sentence is not finished, okay? So we always put the period there to indicate that it's ended and that we're stopping there. So then we know that the sentence is finished, okay? So you must put a period at the end of each sentence. Then you gotta have 10 sentences. Now, when you write, actually, let me do this. Let me give you an example of how you might write. So in talking about your typical daily life and daily activity, for example, you might say, I often eat dinner with my family. Okay, so here I used often as my frequency adverb. Okay. And let me do this and put it down here. That's better. Okay. Now here's another one. Go down one more space. On Saturdays, I always go to a study room, which Korean students would call a 공부방, I believe, or I forgot the other Korean name. But anyway, it's like a 공부방. So I always, on Saturdays, I always go to a study room. Weekdays, I usually spend time with friends. Okay, and then let's get one more example. In this case, I'll use a time expression. I study for my major subject 3 times a week. Okay, something like that. All right, so we can indicate using our frequency adverbs, like so, or a time expression, which goes at the end of the sentence, okay, during our writing. So you're gonna make 10 sentences like this, and it's gonna be based on your daily life, your schedule, okay? And it's up to you what kind of activities that you want to mention in your writing, okay? Now for assignment number 3, you're doing the writing assignment, and I showed you examples of how to write your daily life activities. Okay, now the way to prepare it though, for example, if you go to your Google Classroom, basically as long as you're logged into Google on your account, you can access different apps with Google. So you can see right here where I'm clicking on, it says Google Apps. Okay, and there you have different options for different kinds of apps that you can use. All right, now the one that I want you to use though is Docs. Okay, this one right here. So if you click on it, okay, you'll see they have templates of different types of files that you could set up. In this case though, it's best if you just go to blank and start a new document. Okay, so when you click on it, it'll open a new document, a Google document. And then once you enter, what you'll need to do is make sure you put your name. Okay, so your Korean name, for example, I'll just put here. No, okay, here's the student's name. Okay. Their student number can go here, 54921, okay, for example. Okay, and then also your class number. Okay, so whatever your class number is, you want to make sure you have that in there, okay? And that this is assignment number 3, okay? So please have all that, your name, student number, class number, and the assignment number. Okay, and then you can go ahead and begin. Now, what you're doing here is you're writing about your daily activities. So again, I showed you an example earlier, but you can just simply number them. Okay, and then for example, put I often meet my friends downtown on weekends. Okay, so there's an example. And you're just going to write 10 total examples. Okay. And then what you'll need to do is make sure that you post this to your Google Classroom, okay? Which you could just, you want to save it, all right? So you're going to save it. And then once you've saved it, you can bring it into your class so that I can see it, okay? And then I can open it and then check the file, okay? So let's say if I save this one here, and then you're going to share it to me. Okay, like so. All right, now, so this is one way to do it. If you prefer, another way could be if you create a Microsoft Word file, okay, like I'm showing you here. You could do it from here too if you prefer, right? So you do the same thing though. You'd put your name, your student number, and your class number. Okay, as an example. And then your assignment number. And skip a few lines and then start your sentences like so, okay? And then what you do is you would save your file and then upload it to your Google Class, okay? So that's another way to do. Either way would be acceptable. Just I think using the docs in Google Classroom is probably the easier way to do it, okay? This way here, but if you prefer, you can do it that way. Now, another way you could do it here under Google Docs, you could save. Hold on a second. Yeah, you could even add a shortcut to your Google Drive and then share that to me. But I think it's best if you just share to the class, okay? Or you could make a copy and then paste that into the class, okay? So example, if I go to this class and then you're posting your classwork, it'll be in your class, okay? You could copy and paste it in and then upload it to your Google Class, okay? That would be a possible way to do it, but it's up to you. As long as you have your finished file with 10 sentences, all right?